Hi everyone. Hope you're having a good day at the conference today. I've already used my beer coupon. Unfortunately found the point levels are like really half of the one we are used to. So I hope you will enjoy this, and there's been some fantastic lineup today. And thanks to organizers for this fantastic event. I believe you're enjoying it. And my topic a little bit relates to the previous one given by Zolatan about Windows. But we'll concentrate more towards Active Directory because I believe it's one of the most underrated topics, not given enough attention because of the amount of issues we are having, especially offense is always the glamour part, but the defense is lacking the attention. So we'll try to deal both the sides of the fence. This is a little bit about me. So work at a company Defensa based out of Manchester, UK. So mostly work for UK and Middle East clients. Usual pen testing, live red teaming, pen testing applications, wireless, pretty much everything runs with IP. A little bit of conferences and training experience. Yeah, that's pretty much about providing assurance to the clients. So some look about it, some don't, and some don't fix or some don't care, so each to their own. This is pretty much the agenda we are going to cover today. So I know Active Directory is a too familiar name, pretty much. Everyone among you might have come across it, even though they don't know, maybe they work in a different domain and they don't come across domain controls or things like that. But as soon as you log into a computer in your office, they are most likely part of a Windows network, which is known as Active Directory. And there are many reasons, like in a day-to-day life, you come across these, but the security is always in the background picture. And because of the insider threat, the latest buzzwords that you see in the media and all are down to Active Directory Windows environment. So we're going to go through fundamentals. Although I know it's a security con, but I really believe that we need to cover the basics a little bit to set up a picture and a bit of ground first, and then move towards the domain controller workings, what's its functional role in the Active Directory environment, and then cover the threats and detections. So hopefully we'll cover that in the time we have. Let's go for it now. So this is a bit of negotiating with you, the expectation levels, how we're going to go for all this. So this is nothing like a presentation of any rocket science or any big topics or any research. This is all just the information gathered around from different sources, put for a useful cause. So if I can do it, any of you can do it as well. The word security, I'll just mention it. So the word security in the first one-third of the presentation is all about, typically how admins are, the people in the networking industry, I'm talking about 90s, use the word security just to define the boundary. It had nothing to do with the actual cybersecurity that we talk about today. So that's more about logical boundary. So whenever I speak about this word, it doesn't mean the attack and defense part, but it's more like just a normal boundary, really, logical way of saying it. If I have to provide you an example, it'd be like a few years ago, even now, some admins call VLAN as being used for security, although it's not configured at the switch interfaces to do the security work, but they just call it okay because it's logically dividing the segments of the network, even though the flow of the information is same, and even if it's trunked, they still call it for security purposes. So it's that sort of concept. Okay, so I'll try to be fast with the fundamentals, so apologies in advance if you think it's really fast at the start, but it's strictly important to set up and connect the dots in order to understand the later phases, which are really the crux of this talk and why I'm presenting here. So as everybody knows, Active Directory is more of a trademarked directory service of Microsoft, and the main reason this is so popular, although it's also so popular in the security community, is because of the centralized approach it uses to automate the network management of the data, of the user's data, for administrative control, and it's really designed for distributed networking environments. AD was new. I mean, I will often call AD now for Active Directory. AD was new to the Windows 2000 because it was just a start with Windows anti-kernel. And then 2003, we see 2008, now 2012, 2016 is in production almost now. So it's mainly helping you with providing the redundancy or fault tolerance. Basically maintaining a good network growth where things can be automated and there's a centralized control of the whole environment. So the structure is composed of these components. Forest is like a security boundary for a network, for a Windows network, and it'll be a collection of every attribute that's part of a Windows network that would contain domains, that will have organization units, sites, all in one is probably known as forest. And then there's a domain. Domain is really a collection of computers put together in network topology. Topology is more like a fashion, but in a technological way. And all these computers in a domain follow some set protocol. That means set policies, names and database of the members is collected together. And then authentication is on the domain basis only. So I'm going to clarify further with a diagram in the next slide how the different domains can be put together in a forest and how does it look like. And now the OU is like an organization unit, so it's like different departments in an organization. So this is more like a container in a domain. So the way we are going down from the definitions is like in a hierarchical structure. So this is a structure that's presented in any domain. And then there are sites which are like the physical groupings independent of the domain, and they can be geographically apart, and then they're connected by the links, which is like normally we have these MPLS or network links, and they can be based on the speeds which are high or low, and then are more often defined by the IP subnets and all. This is a quick picture showing how a domain and a forest is laid out. So if you see, this is like a corporate domain. This is also the forest root domain, and forest root domain has got subdomains which can be part of different departments here. And the arrows you see are bidirectional. That means that's the trust setup between them. So if it says bidirectional, that means the flow of any user-related data or any administrative data or management of the domain-related data can go from this child to this parent, or from parent it can flow down to child as well. So there are different sets collected here, and then you can also have a similar setup here, the same forest, and all different domains can be part of one forest, which will be a parent forest here. Now going towards the different types of Active Directory services, what are their functions, and these are the different services that we have. Domain service is really about storing the directory data, how to manage that, how to maintain a communication between different users or objects or computers. And then the certificate services is all about maintaining the certificate management between different identities, how to present these identities in a secure fashion in order to make sure the communication is secure. And then there's a federation services. This is the modern concept. I mean, it's been a few years now, but it's more about how a single online session can be used to put a trust relationship so that you don't have to log in, a user doesn't have to log in every time to a different application which is directly enabled. So over the lifespan of one session, you can be part of all the different applications. And this is also what we call is based on web-based single sign-on technology. And then there's a lightweight directory services. This is like a portable version of a directory services where you don't really need the Active Directory domain services, but you can still use it independently for certain units or stores, for example. And then the last is rights management. This is about the protection of information and how you actually protect the information, more about file rights and who signed it, and also takes care of the management of digital signatures as part of this. So these are the major services that are part of the Active Directory environment. Okay, so this is just quickly about. So I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit of detail about how all of them are, what are they, what are the benefits and the roles of them. And then we're going to slowly start moving towards the security side of things later on when the basics are done. So this is really ADDS is like a domain services, which is like a distributed database used for management of information about network sources or user data or the attributes set for each of those users or the computers. And it's done in a hierarchical manner. And the benefits are it's a scalable because if we see now the way Windows are growing, or the Microsoft is growing, the Windows is also coming out of a network. Previously, it used to be you need to be physically in one network and then use same computer to log in, and then you'll be part of a network. Now, with the advent of the new technologies and all, you don't need to be part of the same network. You can be part of a different country, but that will be previously, after that, it was like more, you still need to be part of the same site, which will be part of the main global headquarters. But now you don't need to be in the office. But there are technologies that will do the trust relationship on your behalf, on your computer behalf, and that will still can be part of the domain, which will be part of your office network. And then there's a delegation, which is delegating the control of permissions of different objects down to perform different sort of functions based on privileges. And then there's a security is one of the benefits, as Microsoft says, for authentication and access control purposes. Because a single network login is enough rather than providing the onus of maintaining these user credentials on the users. So this will help you. But then on the security side of things, we'll later see how a single network login can also be helpful for you to compromise the whole domain. When I say domain, it's like one unit of computer network. Other features, these are different type of sets or sort of like different components, part of the domain services, which contains a schema. Schema is just like a definition of all the objects and attributes that are used to store data in an Active Directory environment. And then there's a global catalog. It's always on a domain controller. Domain controller is the computer, which is a server, main server, that takes care of the administration of the whole Active Directory. And then the querying mechanism for different objects to index the data so that objects can be found fast by the network when they're queried upon by the network users or applications. And then there's a replication of data between the different member servers or primary and secondary domain controllers. And then there's an operation master's role. This is more done for ensuring that consistency is maintained and there's less faults and the fault tolerance is there in a domain. So with time now, we see Windows have developed, obviously. So since Windows Server 2008, we have these new features as part of the Windows domain. So when you say RODC, this means a read-only domain controller. That will act as a domain controller, but will not have the same content as the main domain controller. This is mainly done to avoid any risk of theft of credentials, basically, because the cached passwords are removed from this read-only domain controller, and it can be installed at some other location for the efficiency purposes. For example, let's think about a big network where the headquarters have got the full-fledged IT team and they have got IT operations team, but then they are in a manufacturing environment, for example, so they also got a workshop or a factory where there are like 200 users. So in order to make sure they have a login process which is efficient, they will put a copy of read-only domain controller at that workshop because they know it's not that secure. So that means even if that's compromised, but that will not compromise the identity, that means the passwords of the Active Directory users. Similarly, other advantages are there, admin role separation, so you can actually separate the roles of the users. And secure installation media, so you can now secure using anti-DS backup. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, and then restartable ADDS, you can also restart the, sorry, just a second, I guess I'm not able to use my mouse here on this. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So restartable ADDS, and as it says, restartable. Fine-grained password policy, you can also define password policies on and account lockout policies on different users and the global security groups in a domain. That means new password setting objects and the precedence rules have been added to remove the restriction of a single password policy for the whole domain. So that can be set for different set of admins and all. So now the certification services, as the name says, it's really about enhancing the security by binding identity of a device, of a person to the corresponding private key. So it should be cost-effective solution because it could be hosted within an environment on a server or on a domain controller itself as well. But in line with good practices, they always say it should be on different server. And then the supported applications include all these applications that we use in modern day world: IPsec, VPN, encrypting file systems, and the SMIMEs, which is like the secure multi-purpose internet mail extensions. And then these are the different type of certificate services that we have. CA is the certificate authority that's responsible for issuing and the management of the certificates to all the users and the computers within the network. And then there's a web enrollment. This is one of the methods by which you can actually connect to a CA, which is the certificate authority, to ask for to request a certificate or also request CRLs, which are the certificate revocation list that contain the list about certificates that have been revocated. And then the online responder, which is for revocation status purposes, and the network device enrollment service, which is for the network devices, for example, routers or firewalls, which are not domain joined, so they can use this to request the certificate services. This is a quick certification services architecture diagram, which just shows that how the flow happens. I'm trying to use this. It doesn't breaks out. Okay, yeah. So this client module is actually, the function of this is to request the certificate request, to submit it to the certificate services engine. So this engine is responsible for the processing, and then it asks the policy module whether a requester qualifies for the criteria, why it's asking for a certificate. If that's a valid request, then it will send its own decision, and the certificate services will then generate a private key and distribute it to the requester protected certificate, which is done by these crypto APIs below part of these, if you see these, understand. And then the certificate database is responsible for managing all the information about the keys or storing the CRL lists. And then the Active Directory is used to sync all the certificate transactions. And the audit trail is also maintained by the certificate database. Then the next in our list of services are federation services. This is all about the web SSO, which is the single sign-on that we use to authenticate a user to multiple applications over the life of a single online session, so that you don't have to log into the different services, and the user doesn't have to store multiple passwords or multiple identities. That also adds a security risk to the organization. To avoid that, it offers that in this different types of roles. So these are the role services for this. Federation services, proxy, claimsware, and Windows token. These are independent applications who are responsible for providing the federation services to in an AD environment. Most of the times we see federation services and proxy. I've also put together a quick diagram to show you how the session happens. The first request, apologies, I guess this is the wrong direction. So read 1 as a 2, 2 as a 1, because the request is initially, access is requested by the user to the cloud service, which is directly enabled cloud service. It's asking for access. So it's like a simplified diagram to show how this mechanism works. And then this ADFS server sits in a DMZ because it also talks to the AD server internally, and outside the user is on the internet. So when this user asks for requesting for access to the cloud service, it requests a token, and then this user requests for a token from the ADFS. So this federation services confirms whether that user needs any user is a valid token, and then confirms it with the AD because all the identities and the secrets are stored here. So once this is requested by the AD to the ADFS server, then it issues the token. So similarly, if there are multiple applications, for example, here, another one, they would be all belonging based on the same lifespan of the token issued from here. sorry if you're finding it a bit fast, so we need to cover the basics quick and the time is running, so after that moving to security. So this is the lightweight directory access protocol. It's like a directory service providing the flexible support for all the directory enabled applications. So you can provide directory services for directory enabled services without actually incurring the setup of a proper domain controller or the AD environment. So this can be integrated with the already established AD. For example, in a big enterprises, there are different directory stores and there are different extranet authentication stores for the vendors. So they set up lightweight directory services which contains the personalized information about the applications or the users or anything specific to that business unit. But they authenticate, the identities and everything are authenticated through the Active Directory, which is set up in the corporate environment. So that's pretty much the gist of it. This is the rights management services. This is more about protecting the individuals, allowing the individuals and any of the administrators or the staff and ID through information rights management policies to specify access permissions on the files. So this could be any of your documentation, presentation, or workbooks. And these permissions stay with the file so that it doesn't matter if you move the file to somewhere else because the permissions are actually stored in the file in an XML format in these Word files. So the benefits are because these are persistent to use. Like I said, it just remains with the information no matter where it's moved or you send it to somebody else or forward it via email. Also prevents the unauthorized recipients from performing authorized action. For example, you're part of your company, but you're not having a high-level privileges as an admin or super admin. Still, if you forward it to somebody else or outside, that doesn't mean, it will just figure out, it will tell you whether that authorized person has permission to access that file. If not, it won't let you to do it. But one of the good things about this is also it offers a modular support with the hardware security modules as well. If companies are serious to implement this can be integrated with the hardware security modules. So this is a quick diagram. So this diagram is stolen from the Microsoft TechNet. You'll see I've mentioned at the end the sources for these images. So what's happening quickly is it's just showing you how a quick access mechanism happens. So if Terry is requesting for, applies his access restrictions on a document, and the RMS client actually, this is the RMS client, and this launches a request to the RMS server, and then RMS server returns a client licenser certificate back to Terry, and then he can send that document with the right permissions to this user, who's Lola, and then she can actually send the rights protected Word document. She can actually receive that document and try to open it if she has got the right permissions, and those will be checked against the RMS server for the access. So yeah, that's pretty much. Okay, moving on to fast forward to 2016. As you see now, Microsoft and especially Microsoft has put so much stress on mobile security and cloud. One of the things that's happening at a major level is since 2016 server level releases is both they're trying to keep the operability and the security in a balanced fashion. And because cloud is so important these days, obviously for the obvious reasons, cost and efficiency and speed and whatnot, they're trying to. So Microsoft has improved this Windows Server 16 with some of the major improvements, which is PAM. So if you have any interaction with the Linux operating system, you'll know what I mean by PAM. And then is a Azure AD join, which is again a way of keeping the BYOD devices, bring your own devices, to either register or join the domains remotely. And then there's a MS Passport, which is also Hello Business, they call it. This is a certificate-based mechanism for authentication purposes. I guess the reason they came up with these is because Microsoft really found its pain in the backside for credential theft techniques and stuff that we are reading about from the attack perspective, mimikatz or the password stealing, pass the hash, pass the ticket, overpass the hash ticket, sorry, and these techniques. So they're trying to come up with these to say that they admit these things can never be stopped, but then the real issue lies with the identity and the excessive permissions applied to the users, because if somebody's made an admin in an organization, he just enjoys their rights forever because there's no process to actually revoke his rights soon after. That's always the human nature, because if you know, and he, for example, somebody, a database developer, he needs access and then needs to run some function at a high privilege, he'll be given DBA privileges probably forever, and then they forget it. So this is the problem that Microsoft has tried to deal with using the PAM module here. So I'll take you through a quick diagram, the way privilege access management, sorry, it stands for privilege access management, PAM, the how it deals with it. There are other improvements as well, time synchronization and all. I guess these are the more pains on the administration side, how difficult it is to maintain sometimes when the servers are out of sync. I've done that at my first job, so probably if there's any admins around, you will know how painful it is. Sorry, one of the other improvements was group membership expiration. So you can always provide the time limit to the users who are sometimes added temporarily to certain groups. So this is a quick diagram showing the requests in the 7 steps. So what we are going to go through here is like HR admins is the group here, which is having higher privileges. And SID is the system identifier for Windows Active Directory. That at the back end, it just denotes through this number at the end. I'll show you later what it means. And then the second is it shows that because someone from the HR admins group needs actually database privileges, database admin access in order to do it, and then a shadow principal with no members is actually created in the Bastion forest. So this is like a shadow forest created at the same time, but it's more like a really isolated forest. No one has their privileges, and Microsoft claims it's like a ultimately secure thing. So for the time, just think it's like a shadow forest created here by the PAM, and the corporate HR admin group has got a member, Jen, who's asking for access to it. So she needs to go through MIM, which is like an identity manager for Windows. And through that portal, she needs to request the privileges in order to access with a higher privilege. So this MFA could be a multi-factor authentication applied to the portal where she goes in to request it. Once the MIM policies are checked whether this request is valid, the way access granted is the Bastion Forest creates a similar account with a similar SID HR admins and then allows Jen access temporarily through the Kerberos authenticated ticket. Temporarily for that time, and I guess that's known as TTL, which is the same as the concept used as time to live. So that time to live tells you how long is the access maintained for, and if she is part of multiple groups, then the lowest value is taken by the Windows to ensure that the limit is not abused. Sorry. So yeah, that's pretty much the concept of PAM. So advantages are it just isolates and scoping of privileges, and because there's a time expiration as well, so it's not like you can abuse it. And there's additional logging of the workflows through the portals, and as Microsoft said, it's trying to mitigate these threats. So we're going to deal with these later. Now the next advantage was Azure AD, so it just allows you to register or join the devices, which means the devices can be registered but still remain outside the network, or devices can join but still remain, and they'll be part of the domain. The benefits are single sign-on, and they have got integrations with the mobile device management solutions, and also they can access Next resources. And the last advantages with this is Microsoft Passport, which is like a certificate-based authentication approach, where Microsoft is using one of the biometric or a flexible PIN in order to log into the device, and then you can actually, the private key is linked with that right PIN or a biometric feature when you authenticate, and then that decrypts the function that's used to allow access to this. So because the keys are actually hardware attested, so these keys are tied to TPM 1.2 and these modules, is the reason Microsoft is trying to say that this is pretty secure. I've seen in a couple of implementations where these new Surface, the Surface notebooks that we see, so they've got Retina authentication, and that's how they're using Microsoft Hello for Business to be part of the domain. Although you can be sitting here and accessing the Hacktivity wireless network, you can still access your internal applications and portals. Moving on quickly to domain controller, the different parts of directory service agent. Sorry for the bit of a jump here. We need to discuss this because a domain controller is the heartbeat of any network. So if this is compromised, you would know that these are the keys to the kingdom. Anybody can steal ntds.dit, which is the database containing all the password hashes. You can crack them, or use other techniques where you don't need to crack them and pass on. So directory service agent is actually holding all the crux here, which means this is a main AD component, and it runs as part of the LSAS process, which is a local security authority subsystem that takes care of the authentication packages and the user services auth. So these are the interfaces here. If you see the different interfaces, LDAP, REPL is for replication, this is messages, this is for messaging, and SAM is the security accounts manager. And then there's ntdsa.dll, which is the directory service agent here, which provides interfaces through which directory clients can gain access to the directory database, because database is here. There's no direct interaction, so it's just acting as a separation layer. And then this is the physical structure, so where the ntds.dit is. So if you see the data file is here, and there's a link table, security descriptor table here, and there's a logs here. So if these logs overflow, there are new logs that are recently created. And that's pretty much, I guess, the basics if you see this. Let's move on to the hacking now. So what we're going to discuss here is now the main steps of a cyber kill chain, which are actually related with Active Directory hacks. So the CKC, as they say, Lockheed Martin have developed this framework. They call it CKC. So we'll be mostly dealing with these. Let me see. So we'll see the exploitation phase, installation of any malware on the assets inside. And then there's the command and control servers, which are for persistence to stay there and for lateral movement. And then there are actions on the objective. So whoever is hacking it, he or she has got a purpose, either to destroy some files or move some files out of the network or steal the passwords, or they might have some, anyway. Could be to hack some elections, I don't know. So this is actually the bulleted example for each step where it's not an absolute list of options. It's more like if a cyber intelligence analyst has to make an assessment as to what are the correct answers for threats facing them or the missions they're trying to support. These involve the steps that actually from the decision to act to actually executing those provided opportunities. So I've highlighted these elements which are really related to our talk right now here. So these are the ones which would be linked with the internal network. Here's the full link if you want to read the full intelligence report by them. It's on the NIST site. So most of the time, the attack techniques are actually in any internal network. They start with the ground up. So that means you need to build up the ground first by collecting information and then analyzing them. And there are different techniques, whether you need to make noise on the network or you just want to do it with, say, PowerShell tools these days, or even with Gabrus, SPN scanning and stuff, which I'm covering later. And then the second part is escalating your privileges, because you've gained access to it. With low-level privileges, you can never see or do these things like extracting passwords or performing functions to change the state of the system or deleting logs or things like these. So you need higher-level privileges. And then there's a stage where you access secrets, which means the passwords either in a clear text form or stealing the hashes or dumping them. So yeah, info collection is really a main part of this. I would say is the homework of any hacking exercise. So from the offense part, we're dealing with this in 3 stages. So recon is short for reconnaissance. You're just, I guess these terms are originating from the military where they do these activities. And then that's like gathering information and then performing an analysis, and then escalation, target exploitation, and there's persistence, means maintaining the access, or you can maintain the access for as long as possible you need it. Now, recon, these are really basic things I put down, but the stress I've given in this presentation is not to tell you any references to other tools, because we are looking at the latest ways attackers are doing this is not using any custom-built tools, but using the built-in commands within the operating system or the servers or as part of the remote support tools which are installed on them. But these are the basic DOS commands, how you can perform user enumeration. In simple English, this would be like retrieving a list of all the users that are part of a network. That means part of your office or your corporation. So this tells you which ports are actually used for querying this. This is only one way through a protocol known as SMB. There could be similar other ways to perform on different protocols, SNMP or anything else. So there's a technique, this is known as read cycling. The term I mentioned earlier, security identifier, looks like this. So even if you have changed, for example, rename the administrator to say guest, but that doesn't mean he's a guest user. So this is the identity that tells you at the back end whether it's really an admin or it's a real user. So 500 is always fixed for a built-in administrator. So you'll know that this is there. So that's like a security by obscurity, if we say. Moving on to read cycling, yeah, this is just one of the ways. So you can do it from unauthenticated perspective or with authenticated perspective as well. Authenticated would be with the user privileges, and then this is how it looks like. Just a quick screenshot. The reason of putting this here is because this will make this sort of access will make noise on the network if you got the right level of monitoring and event analysis going on. So you should have this as a first alarm that there's some activity going on the network. Then moving on to escalation. So these are a little bit of different techniques how you can gather information about the operating system that you have jumped on, and the patch levels to quickly find out if there's any ways to escalate privileges locally, and then all the information about networking, firewall state, what's running there, and the services under process. Similarly, little more tricks here. I guess some of them, if you see, are similar to the previous talk. Zolatan mentioned group policy references as well. This is a quick cheat sheet, really, that you always look for when you're part of the network, you're looking to escalate privileges. I'll take you straight to the domain controllers, what we can do about these. So most common ways for compromising a domain controller really contain the Kerberos attacks these days, because they're stealth, they're a quick, easy win. Within 5-10 minutes, you could have the highest level of privileges in a network, and then all these techniques, pass the hash, pass the ticket, overpass the hash, and then looking for any insecure service permissions, like Zoltan said. I guess actually he's made my job easy. Now I can refer the examples back to the previous talk. And that talk was not supposed to happen. I guess one of the speakers backed out, so they put Zoltan to do that exercise. So that's a good one. And then the stepping up other member servers. So if you have compromised one server, you can actually use some techniques like pass the hash to jump on the other servers on the network till you find the highest level privilege that you're looking for. And then there could be nested administration groups where the privileges are screwed up. So this is the talk from where Kerberos attacks start. So SPN scanning is one of the ways to actually quickly do a stealth exercise to find out all the service principal names. It stands for service principal names. It's mainly for service accounts. So the service accounts are most likely configured with higher privilege accounts. So that's a quick win if you actually get around to those accounts. So any of these services, that doesn't mean this is the whole list. It could be any of these services, SQL Server or RDP protocol, or it could be Exchange client access servers running the SPN. So you can request the SPN types from a domain controller with a domain account. That means you need a low-level privilege, at least a user-level privilege on a Windows network to query this. And then using those, you can actually request Kerberos TGS, which is the ticket granting service request ticket, useful to find out whether you can actually get the ticket issued to you. So when I say this ticket, that actually is encrypted with some algorithm, and inside that is the access for that. So the encryption used is actually most of the times, if it's using RC4, then it could be NTLM-based password that you can brute force to find out the password offline. And then silver and golden tickets. So silver is the one where you get TGS, the ticket granting service ticket for a service account. TGT is the ticket granting ticket from KDC, from the key distribution server of Kerberos that takes care of it. Then the famous MS-14068, where a fake ticket can be issued to the Kerberos to get access as a domain administrator, as a user admin, as a normal user in a domain. And then there's a Kerberos technique, which is quite famous. So Kerberos is really like it's the same process that I've explained above. It's like a really effective method for extracting service account credentials, starting with a spin scanning, as I said, from AD as a regular user. So you are not sending any packets, so you're not making any noise, because users tend to choose poor passwords, and then the same goes for service accounts. So if the service accounts are of the same length as domain passwords, they're not a big deal to be cracked. So you get the hash, and then you just throw the brute forcing offline against it until you find a right password for that in order to crack it and use the service. Yeah, but it's also possible if you can sniff the tickets sometime with the RC4 cipher that we're saying is a problem with the Kerberos technique, and the weakness that it tries to exploit. So if you're able to sniff that, sorry, the sniff is not the English sniff word I'm using here. Sniff is more like if you're eavesdropping on a network and you got access to, and you're capable to monitor network traffic over a wire, then you'll be able to get that packet information out. So that's what sniffing means in the security world. So yeah, the MS-14068, so I'll go into details of this to show quickly what was the problem. So basically you're able to request a TGT without a PAC. PAC is a privileged attribute cert, but by sending actually just a normal request with a PA PAC request set to false. And the reason, the whole process here is that we are trying to forge a PAC because if with the normal user privileges, the PAC can be forged because of the way domain controllers missing this patch and the problem with the KGT with the Kerberos. And then once you have created this TGS ERQ message with the KRB TGT, which is the user for Kerberos in a Windows environment, you can actually use this along with the fake PAC that you created to send this to vulnerable DC, and that will issue you a new Kerberos ticket that you can save and use it for its lifespan. So that means you'll have unrestricted access for the lifespan of that ticket. By default, that ticket is issued for a lifespan of 7 days. After that, it expires. So then probably the domain controller is yours. This is the minimum information you need in order to run this PyCAC. PyCAC is just the name of the exploit, which is written in this Python script that when you run this, you need at least, so for example, I've shown Bob here. Bob is like normal domain user. So you need his username, password, security identifier, which you can find out easily with whoami command on the DOS. You need the name of the DC, domain controller, and then you need to make sure the time is synced from the computer you're trying to hack with the domain controller, because time synchronization is an important factor when it comes to Kerberos world. This is just showing you how, with user Bob's credentials, we're trying to request to DC for a ticket, and this is the name of the ticket that we've got successfully. You can move it to local temp directory wherever you want, and then you can present it with one of the SMB clients. This I'm doing from the Linux distro, so you can have access to the drive whichever you want, because now that ticket is valid through the domain with the super admin privileges. This is one example of attack for the Kerberos fake ticket attack. But one of the other ways, which is really stealth and very popular these days in the security community, is using offensive PowerShell. I've named some of the modules here which are popular, used by the pen testers around to bypass loads of controls inside. So if you've got any security intelligence products, they miss because it's very stealth. There's no noise made on the network, and it's a new concept, so people and businesses are taking too long to enable, say, PowerShell logging and related mitigations. Talking about passwords. So once you have that access, you can always dump these passwords also using the built-in controls. For example, you don't need to create, for example, doing a LSAS injection to get the hashes out or to dump all the user hashes, you can always use ntdsutil.exe, which is inbuilt NTDS binary in the domain controllers. And you can create a snapshot of NTDS database, move that database, and you can always crack the hashes from that. So there's no need for injections or other techniques here. As we see, the threat landscape is changing very fast. So today's attacks are actually outsmarting the traditional attacks using the tools or the techniques and the frameworks which are now probably banned. So another factor that's actually helping these attackers get more smarter is also the security analytics work, which is missed by the threat side of the world. So the defensive side actually is also stepping up their game by using the security analytics, which means security analytics is all about setting a baseline based on the patterns collected on the user objects in a domain. So you will actually be creating like some sort of mechanism without deploying any agents and all, with all the information about the domain objects and attributes, to make sure you can use that information in correlation with the detection attacks to make sure that you catch the attacker activities early in the cycle, not when the compromises happen, but when the reconnaissance or the earlier phases are going on. So that's what these threat solutions are these days. I mean, there are a couple of them going on. For example, you've heard of Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics. That's known as doing some news around the Azure data centers. Microsoft has also started it rolling out slowly to the corporate world. But also, I guess, one Israeli-based startup is there, Javelin Networks. They have developed some product which is AD Protect that also works on a similar manner. So yeah, in defense, these are the three mechanisms that we can actually use in a, it's like a sequential approach we can apply to in a different manner, which would be identifying any events which are in action, for example, recon activities using incident and event monitoring. Then you can mitigate threats to the infrastructure with the use of efficient vulnerability management process. And then prevent is all about stepping up your techniques and defenses to make sure next time the same mistakes are not repeated using the purple teaming or honeypots. Or we have a keynote tomorrow with Harun Mir, so don't miss his talk. He's really one of the famous personalities we have. His idea, his company is doing is pretty good mechanism as well, similar to honeypot. So, well, he hasn't paid me, or I have got no connections, but just saying because it came to my mind talking about the defense. And then after that, the Kerberos attacks we discussed. Now from the defense side, what all we can do. So as I said, because of the issue with the Kerberos thing was really about exploiting the RC4 cipher-based encryption type. So we can always look out for that when the Kerberos noise is made if your logging is enabled efficiently. So you can always look for these events here, these ones where Kerberos tickets is requested, this will be issued, and then the ticket was renewed. So the first event is very noisy, so the volume of logs is quite high. So you need to make sure that you're keeping the balance and making sure that the configurations are right in terms not to avoid any shutdowns. Yeah, so these are again admin log on, log off events, and then the golden. For golden ticket, you need to look at the logs at the DC only, or the domain controller. And for the silver tickets, it's from any member of the domain, which is any computer part of the domain, will be sending that, generating that event. So if you're doing the event logging respectfully, I guess that will be really helpful here. This is a list on our Microsoft blog site of the cipher, for the encryption types, which is in the hacks. If you see 017, this is the 17 and 18. So these are RC4 ciphers that can be used as a keywords to block this. Although the modern operating systems, when I say modern, since Windows 2008, the Kerberos itself has been added with AES support, which is AES 128 and 256 bits. But then sometimes for the big corporations, what's happening is interforest communication is there, and then that interforest support still doesn't use automatically, so that's configured with RC4. So that needs to be done to improve it to AES to enable that support is there for the trust. So this is where the audit can be set within the group policy. These two events. This is how it looks like in an XML format, any event log. So if you see here, this is the event ID, and then this is the information about the username, which is targeted for the event logging. And then there's a domain name and the related information. The SID is there, which is a security identifier. So now the monitoring recommendation, because if you keep on monitoring everything, okay, let's start doing this, that could be so much of a pain because the volume of the traffic being collected is humongous, so that becomes operational overhead as well. So you need to keep in mind which all categories you should go for. For example, you're looking for high privilege accounts, enterprise admin, domain admin, and built-in admins, DBAs, and then account naming conventions. For example, this is very a common theme deployed by the admins. All these machines in a network are named using a naming notation. So you can easily set some regular expression to see that if the name is not familiar to your company, that means some other laptop or machine is connected to the network. So you can always raise that as to be logged so that can be dealt with quickly. Similarly, outside working hour people or external vendors, and then non-active, disabled, or guest accounts, they are also a red alert. And then restricted use systems or devices. For example, sometimes companies leave the screens outside running, and those kiosk modes are actually Windows operating systems behind the scenes. So they can be broken out of, just like Citrix or any other remote working desktops. Detection process. So detection process for offensive PowerShell these days is very important because PowerShell has come up with really a lot of security enhancements since version 5. So you can actually enable the logging per module, and then the script block logging here will log pretty much everything for you. That means the way they're executing, it will contain the full content of the code, the entire script, and also if it's a de-obfuscated code, sometimes you use -encoded for base 64 or any other things to pass your payload without getting recognized. And that will also be there. So it really provides a good base for incident response jobs. This is because it's automatically enabled. These are the log events. You need to set it to off or configure it the way you want it. This is mainly for PowerShell. The tools here, when I refer, I guess most of the times Mimikatz is very popular through PowerShell to read the passwords in clear text or pick up hashes or change the passwords or the hashes for certain users. So these are the keywords that can be used to actually sort out or to search through the logs, and they can be further taken for analysis. And the event ID is this one, 4103. These are just the examples. This is not a full list of when you're monitoring some AD events, which all events are actually of some importance, because obviously this side is the security world where you want to log in everything, but this side is also the administration and the business side of compulsions where you need to set a balance. You can't have a big team actually just looking at the logs whole day. It's a headache at the end of the day. So you need to only log optimum amount of data that can also be dealt with accordingly fast. So this is a quick list, but I've also provided a link here that contains audit sensitive privilege use, which will contain all the elements. For example, if a token is created, if debug programs are there, or any drivers are loaded, or any firmware environment values are changed, or somebody is impersonating a client, basically all the sensitive parts, which will issue a red flag. And in the mitigate approach, it's all about how Kerberos thing can be actually mitigated, or I would say risk can be reduced or minimized. You can always set the service count passwords to quite long characters and ensure that these are not guessable. And then there's a new concept launched by Microsoft during Windows 10, this AMSI, which is anti-malware scan interface. This can be integrated wherever Windows Bitdefender is. So the whole game is being changed by Microsoft now. If you see next 2 years, I highly believe that if you see Windows Bitdefender, I don't know how many of you rely on this, but I rely on it heavily. For Windows 10, you don't need to spend on any antiviruses. So this is giving a really good competition to all these big antiviruses. And then even in media, there are news now that there's been some online legal fights going on between these vendors and Microsoft. And then Microsoft is stepping up its game with advanced threat analytics, which will be there. So I think these all will be components will be part of the operating system now, the one when it will be given to the users, so that you don't need to rely on different vendors. I don't know if it's a business move, but security-wise, if they're doing it right and efficiently, I guess that will add bonus to the resources on the operating system. So all these different modules are enabled with the logging here, PowerShell, JavaScript, VBScript, security identity, and anti-malware. These script engines are actually integrated, so as soon as there's any alerts or events, they just pull that and feed it to the anti-malware engine, and that looks into the malware things. In the prevent method, what we can do to reduce these activities and how to learn these lessons to not repeat again, these are the three main examples, I believe. One would be the implementing least privilege administrative model, where privilege is the main problem because everybody is given permissions quickly, but the time to take off or revoke those permissions is quite long, or they're often forgotten, so they can be misused. And similarly, implementing a secure administrative host, if you got a secure configuration hardlines defined for servers and domain controllers against an attack, they are really useful here. These are the details about the same least privilege administrative model. How these can be useful in terms of those past the hash attacks or overuse of privileges, because it's always down to privileges. Sometimes these enterprise admin, domain admin, and built-in accounts, which are built-in admins, are not seen as really powerful because people say, okay, if it's domain admin, that's more powerful than a built-in admin. But the whole game is about stepping up from the local admin as well. So local admin holds quite a powerful function in a network. So this should be disabled via group policy. And reducing the privileges, again, disabling the local admin, configuring your group policies to restrict administrative accounts, securing the built-in accounts in this. And these are a couple of examples where you can actually use to the controls which are inbuilt to limit these. For example, the account is sensitive and cannot be delegated flag. So it will immediately tell you if the attribute on a domain-based account, the credentials cannot be presented to other computers when you're trying to actually throw the hashes around to see if they be, because if the account you're trying to use on the domain admin, it will restrict you and not let you log in. So similarly, if smart card is there for interactive logins, that will be flagged immediately. Yeah, so I'm flying through now. I guess we're running out of time. So secure administrative host, this is more about the principles about separating the privileges between the trusted and the non-trusted areas. I've made this quick list how you should look at it from the different perspectives, which means the account configuration, physical security is also important, and then the app locker policies for restricting the users. RDP restrictions are also important because of the remote access. And then the patching is one of the important, as we showed you through MS 14.068, and blocking internet access on the servers because that serves no use. You don't really need it. And then any unsussy software as well. And then virtualization is also very helpful at times when, where possible, I would say, consider implementing these virtual machines as administrative hosts, because that can create per user administrative systems, and you can create more rather than actually adding up to the cost. And then perimeter firewalls on the defenses. These are references. Images are stolen from TechNet, apart from the blue ones that I created. Events to monitor link is here, securing AD best practices. And then this source is really helpful if you're looking at reading in detail concepts about Kerberos or other attacks. I've read this a lot and I follow this guy, so huge thanks to him. That's pretty much for today.